Hello, and thank you for joining me again today on the Finding Hope After Loss podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. You can really help the show reach more loss and infertility families by taking a moment to leave a positive review or rating on Apple or Spotify. Check us out on Patreon for exclusive bonus content. Just go to patreon.com/Finding Hope After Loss. You can also check out more information about the episode in the show notes at journeyforjasmine.com. Today, I am talking with Meg. She shares her powerful 6-year journey through infertility, including 7 heartbreaking miscarriages, IVF, endometriosis, adenomyosis, and autoimmune challenges. She opens up about the emotional toil of going through infertility and loss, finding hope through connection, and preparing for her next transfer while working with multiple specialists. Hello, everyone. Today I am here with Meg. Meg, can you tell us a little about yourself?
Sure. Hi, Sarah. Hi, everyone. My name is Meg. I am from Chicago, but I live in the Bay Area now in California. Been out here for about 10 years. I work for a nonprofit. I've been with this nonprofit for a while, but I've always kind of focused in homelessness and mental health and anti-poverty efforts. I live with my husband and our very sweet dog, Rowena. And we have been trying to have a family, trying to have children for about going on 6 years now, and still in the effort.
I have to ask, what kind of dog do you have?
Oh my goodness. She is a Cavalier Spaniel. She is my second Cavalier Spaniel, both from rescue groups, these like rehome programs that focus on, getting dogs that have been gotten from puppy mills and breeding farms and things like that. And she is just such a little snuggle bug, and everything that she does that's misbehaving is my fault because I am causing it.
I know that makes it kind of hard to be mad, right?
I know it's like she gets separation anxiety, but I have her sleeping on my lap. So
You're
that's
like, well, I have myself to blame, so
right.
can't be mad at that cute face, right? So, do you mind sharing a little more about your journey?
My husband and I have been together for about 15 years, which is wild because that just means I am getting up there in age. But we started trying to have a kid pretty soon after we got married, about 6 years ago. We started trying to have a baby. Definitely started as most people start, thinking there'd be no issues. So we kind of did that, like, we're just no longer trying not to get pregnant, which, just means we're trying to get pregnant. And it took about 6 months, which, felt not great, but it wasn't like medically concerning. And then I did finally get pregnant, but I lost that pregnancy at about 10 weeks. At that time, we were still, kind of being told by doctors, like, hey, this happens. This is common. This happens. A lot of people have miscarriages. You'll probably get pregnant again soon and have no problem. So they didn't really do any tests. I didn't know to ask for tests. I just took what they said at face value. But then I kept having miscarriages. I had another and then another. And it was after 3 that my OBGYN was like, this is out of my expertise. OBGYNs are typically not, trained and experts in pregnancy loss and infertility. They're there for when you are pregnant and giving birth and the baby. So that's when we went to a specialist. That was about 4 years ago. Since then, I have had, it's so weird to say how many miscarriages I've had because then, like 6 months later, I find I'm updating the number sadly, but I've had 7 miscarriages since then. 2 were from IVF transfers with PGT tested embryos. We have, done a lot of tests, like everything you can find to explore. I was diagnosed with endometriosis and adenomyosis, which was one of those diagnoses that I said, yeah, I feel like I've been aware of this since I was 11 and got my first period, but no one really cared to check. I have a Müllerian abnormality. I have autoimmune issues. You learn all these things, but then you try to address them, and it still doesn't mean it will work. We don't know for sure that which one of those is the cause of the losses. We don't know, if all the, even when when you're trying to heal those, you can't know for sure it'll work. So it hasn't yet, but Where we're at right now is I am at three different clinics because one is not enough. I am with our IVF clinic, our endocrinologist there. I am with an immunologist, a reproductive immunologist, and I am with a recurrent miscarriage specialist. So, with all of them combined and all of their opinions, we're just really, really hoping that, all of these tools and expertise might be what finally works in our next transfer.
So do you have a lot of doctor appointments that you go to?
Oh my gosh, so many doctor appointments. My husband said to me recently, he was like, you don't have a GP. You should really have a general practitioner. And I was like, I have everyone. I was like, I'm like, I can't fit another in. I can't even think about like the idea of going to the dentist is like one more thing. But I do have a lot of doctor appointments. We, a lot of them are, maybe it's on Zoom, maybe it's blood work being done somewhere else. I've had nurses come to my home and draw blood, but it does feel like, the last few years has been a constant scheduling scramble of, sacrificing work appointments and sacrificing social things and just always having to try to fit in the appointment when they can fit me in.
Right. And I mean, you said you're in California, right? So, I
Yeah.
mean, do you at least have access to like a lot of doctors there, or is it like you have to go to a certain one?
I'm really, really fortunate. The Bay Area has a lot of not only fertility clinics, but we have, Stanford has a lot of studies being done. And the recurrent miscarriage specialist I see is about an hour away. So when there's no traffic. So it's not too bad. The immunologist I see is actually based out of Chicago, but they do most of their work remote. But it is really fortunate. I think about when people live in more rural communities, not close to cities, when they have to travel for care and testing, what an added challenge that must be. So I do feel very fortunate to live near care.
Before you went through it, did you really know anybody else who had gone through infertility?
No, I, I knew some people who maybe had a miscarriage, and I knew some people I knew what, a couple who did IVF that worked the first time. So, I knew people who had a bit of their story in there. What I didn't know is anyone who was a long hauler like myself or who it didn't work for right away. I didn't know anyone I was close enough to that I could really talk to about it, that I could really, get into the grief and the heartache and the ickiness that comes with it. And I didn't have anyone like that. And that it's very lonely. And I almost, you know, I think a lot of people find a comfort in hearing miscarriages happen a lot. It's common. There could be a comfort in that. For me, I found it to be less comforting because just because something is common doesn't make it easy. And what got harder is the more miscarriages I had, the less common it was. I'm no longer in this, 25% of pregnancies, but I'm in this very, kind of rare percentage of people who've had multiple. And it starts to feel like, why does it matter that other people have been through pain? I'm going through pain right now. So that didn't really help me a lot, but it wasn't until I created my Instagram account that I actually found people that I could really talk to about it and ask questions and even make friends on there where we could send each other photos and be like, does this look weird or what's up with this clot or like really get into the nastiness of the whole thing. I remember before my first transfer, sending a message out to the community and being like, okay, be honest with me. Has anyone actually peed on the table? Because I can't imagine holding in all that water. So that helped me a lot when I found that.
Sometimes it's one of those things that people don't find humorous, but like sometimes you have to find the humor in it or else you'll just go insane.
Absolutely. And there are some moments that are like, this is so ridiculous. Like when I started IVF, I had no idea that I'd be going in for the first ultrasound on my second day of my period, which is a very heavy day. I've got a very heavy flow, and I went in there and I was like, I feel like this is out of a horror film, but like we're in it.
Yeah, the first time I had to do that, I'm just like, I mean, I feel like I had to explain myself. Well, I'm on my period. Are you sure it's okay? They're like, oh, no, we do this all the time. I'm like, but I don't do this all the time.
Exactly.
Like, just getting all in my space during that time, you know?
Like, is anyone gonna put like plastic down on the floor?
And then they just like wipe it off and bring the next person in,
Yeah.
It's just like it's crazy. You're right though. It's just so weird to think about that kind of stuff because you're just like I never saw myself being here, like
Yeah.
doing this.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I feel like too, a lot of people don't think of I think people think of infertility as you can't get pregnant. I don't think they think about it as sometimes that means you can get pregnant, but you can't carry the pregnancy. Is that anything that you've like come up against?
Absolutely. And I try a lot to use the words infertility and pregnancy loss and miscarriage together because certainly, having a single miscarriage, there's a lot of reasons that can happen. And as I said, we do hear that's common. It doesn't necessarily mean you have infertility, but when you do have medical conditions like I have, endometriosis, Mullerian abnormality, like when you have these things that prevent you from having a successful pregnancy, that is infertility. It is the lack of ability to have a successful pregnancy. And so, I think the feelings can often be different. I think that somebody I hear people who share their heartbreak over never seeing a positive pregnancy test, and I certainly sympathize with how hard that must feel too. But I do think at the end of the day, all any of us want is a healthy baby. And so we're all feeling that same ache of just getting to the healthy baby. That's what the goal is at the end. So in that way, I think, we can all relate in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think we don't have to have like the same journey or the same situation or the same issue to know what that pain feels like. And like you said, it might be slightly different based on your situation, but I think you're right. We all just, want that end goal to be the same. So,
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, I speak to a lot of women who the challenge in their relationship is male factor infertility. And so they've said to me they don't feel as welcome in the infertile community because their body is not the one that's infertile, but they still experience the hardship of having to go through IVF or not being able to successfully have a baby with their partner. And so I think that I really try to remove any boundaries people want to create over vernacular, over what the cause is, and just remember that we are all feeling that same heartache of not being able to get to family, not being able to get to that baby. We have families, but not having that baby.
I guess I'd never really thought about that, about, people who are dealing with the male factor infertility not feeling as welcome or feeling kind of like the outsiders in the community. I think that's a not interesting point, but a important point to bring
Yeah.
up.
And they have grief and challenges that are totally different. And it's still, it's different feelings. I don't my husband doesn't have that issue, and so we are approaching this in a different way. A doctor once told him after his like first sperm sample, I still kind of resent this doctor a little bit for saying it, but she's like this. He's like, the sperm is amazing. This is a like Iron Man sperm. And I was like, okay, like let's chill there. Okay, his sperm is just fine. Because then he's like puffing up his chest a little bit. He's like, oh, you don't say. I'm like, all
And you're over here like, okay, he doesn't need that. Thank you. We
right,
just need a he's
chill.
good and let's move on.
Like,
Oh
like
my
power,
gosh, yeah.
babe.
And then you're over here like, okay, well, I guess I'm the broken one. Thanks.
Yeah, exactly. Happy for you.
So do you feel like doctors have, I mean, I know you mentioned that like with the endometriosis that you kind of felt like you had that, but nobody ever checked. Do you feel like along your journey that doctors didn't listen to you?
Gosh, yes. I will never forget my very first gynecologist visit I ever went to. I was very young. I was in fourth grade when I got my period. And so I was the only one I knew in my class who had it. And that alone was a sign that like, okay, this is pretty young. And then my cramps were so bad that I just remember laying on cold bathroom floors because it was the only thing that felt comfortable by the toilet because I'd be throwing up and I'd always miss school. And we went to the doctor, and the doctor, he was kind of just like, yeah, well, periods are painful, and it's probably because she's so young that she's not able to handle the pain. And then, a year or two later, I'm still in that much pain, and still they just put me on birth control. So I was in junior high school on the birth control pill to manage pain rather than actually trying to explore, like, why is she in so much pain? And maybe it's not just that she's weak and can't handle pain. And so I was on birth control until my early 20s when I finally said, you know what, I'm not sure I want to keep taking this hormonal medication. It was making me feel nauseous in the middle of my cycle. So I went off of that. And then still gynos were just kind of dismissive. I remember once finally in my mid 20s bringing up endometriosis, doing all my own research and then bringing it up. And they just said it's very unlikely, but we would have to do a surgery to confirm, and we don't do surgeries without reason. And I remember thinking, like, isn't my pain a reason?
Yeah.
Isn't this a reason? And then it wasn't until I was having miscarriages and I went to a fertility specialist that they finally, and I had to have a miscarriage after a round of IVF again with a PGT tested embryo that and I really said, I'm like, I want to look for more. I want to know. And they finally agreed. And while I was grateful I finally got a doctor to agree to look, it also made me feel very frustrated for people who do not want to have children and never try to have children. Where do they go to get checked? It's so hard to find doctors that will take our reproductive organs seriously if we're not going to them to use them for reproducing.
Mhm.
And I have a cousin who's been diagnosed with endometriosis in the last few years, and they are not interested in having children, and they had so much trouble getting anyone to take them seriously, had to travel out of state for it. And so it really made me realize, like, I was only ever taken seriously when I was interested in having a kid. And that's not how we should approach our bodily health, our reproductive organs. Just because, we're not using them. Somebody not using a part of their body doesn't mean that our appendix is important to treat if you have appendicitis. But supposedly I don't use that for anything. Uh,
I know. I mean, it is absolutely ridiculous how women are not taken seriously, told like, oh, periods hurt. Like, that's just part of it. Get used to it. That's just what we deal with. And you're over
yeah.
here like, no, this isn't normal. Other people don't deal with this.
I remember just being told growing up, even in school, I remember like the nurse giving us the presentation on your menstrual cycle and them saying like, and cramps are your way of your body preparing you for childbirth. And now I look back and I'm like, what an assumption. I'm like, everyone here wants that. Yeah, it feels very dismissive, but it's more than that. I think it's a real issue it's life-threatening. We have seen women who are not taken seriously die because they are not taken seriously, because they're not treated, because their pain is dismissed. Especially women of color who go to the hospital, their pain is often dismissed more quickly. And so I try to shed a light on it as much as I can that regardless of if you're being treated for fertility reasons, you should be treated and you should be taken seriously.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, I mean, I didn't know, and I was diagnosed with PCOS when I was 16. Kind of same thing, just put on birth control and said, hey, come back when you want to get pregnant, not told anything about what PCOS really meant for me. And as I've, gotten older, I've learned so many more things about it and how important our hormones are to not just our reproductive cycle. So, kind of like what you're talking about. And I just think that doctors really need to pay attention to that as well because our hormones affect like every part of us, like our cortisol and our, I mean, just so many things that we're never taught.
Yeah, and we are not studying it enough. And, it's only now just starting to be understood how much it can impact our life and our well-being later in life. We're starting to see associations with these diseases and later in life diseases like dementia. And it's not studied enough, it's not understood enough, and that's very frustrating. And my husband and I have talked a lot about how there's certain treatments that I'm going through that I wouldn't even have accessible to me if not for the fact that I kept having miscarriages. And so while I'm grateful that I have them, I also feel that there's an unfairness to a lot of people who have these diseases but aren't trying to have a child.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And plus, why should you have to go through the pain over and over and over again just to get somebody to listen to you?
I couldn't, oh, when I was just seeing a gynecologist, she kind of said after my second miscarriage, she was like, well, insurance won't cover any recurrent miscarriage testing until you've had three. So come back to me either when you're pregnant or miscarrying. It's like,
Thanks.
we know something's wrong. Very frustrating system. I know it's different in other countries, but here in the United States where I am, I did not feel I was being taken care of.
And I don't think three, I mean, who set that rule? I feel like it was a guy who set that rule, the third class thing. I don't think that was a woman.
Yeah, yeah.
I feel like if it was something that affected more men, we'd probably have more research on it and more.
We'd have so much more. We'd understand so much more about what's going on. I cannot believe that we can like send spaceships to the moon, but or maybe not spaceships to the moon. We can do stuff in space, but you can't really clearly look at my uterus. That's insane.
I mean, it's just like all the things like measuring placentas and measuring cervixes and, for things like that. Like these are easy things that you can do that could help prevent losses and, help things like that. And they don't take that much time or that much money, and doctors won't do them.
Yeah. I mean, I've learned more about my my body and endometriosis and Malarian shaped uteruses. I've learned more from the community on Instagram that I've been connected to, and a lot of doctors on Instagram too, who are just, there's doctors. I recently did an Instagram live with Dr. Lucky Seckhorn, and like there are doctors who are trying to get information out there. And this is not even my doctor, and she taught me more about it than doctors I've seen in person.
That's amazing, though. I'm glad that there are people that are out there. It just, I know it's hard for one person to, get the information out there. And then, sometimes it can be hard to know who to believe on the internet.
My gosh, yes. Very, very scary indeed.
But
I
yeah,
do,
no, I
do,
know.
you know, I do try to remember like there's a lot out there I'm wary of. There's a lot of sales pitches out there. I definitely approach everything with caution. I'm not treating my endometriosis based on what I'm learning on Instagram, but I am hearing from people in the community who are going through it too that are at least able to say, I'll kind of share a post about my endo, and then I'll have somebody send me a message that's like, "Hey, I don't know if you've, talked to your doctor about this test, but here's what I did and learned." And so it's just something to explore. It just gives me something to consider.
I'm so glad that the infertility and loss communities are around now. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that they weren't, or that,
Yeah,
it was just if you happen to know somebody, then you would have them to talk to. And now you can just log on to social media and see all these people sharing their experiences.
totally agree.
Do you have complicated feelings at all when it comes to other people getting pregnant? Because I know that was always a really rough one for me.
Yeah, I do. A lot of it is just that feeling of unfairness. I think that we feel obligated to say I'm happy for them but sad for me, but like frankly sometimes I'm not even that happy for them. Like, you know, I I have a neighbor who has three children under five and not even all of them intentionally and just gets pregnant very easily and it was hard to feel happy for her when she told me she was pregnant with a third. If anything, I just felt numb. I felt nothing. I felt okay. I'm like, okay, that's working for you again. I also have trouble, sometimes I struggle with when people even have trouble and then they go through IVF and it works the first time. And then I feel an unfairness there. I don't like to play the grief and limbics. I know there's struggles are struggles all around. I also know that it's hard once you have a baby and you're going through postpartum. And I respect that and appreciate that. But there have definitely been moments where I just feel that why me? Why can't I have it that easily? Why do I have to spend all my savings on this? Why do I have to keep going to appointments and sacrifice my career and relationships and the heartache on my marriage? And I I I struggle a lot with just wanting an answer of why me. And there is no answer. There's no universal reason. I genuinely believe there's no universal reason because we see people become parents who, do terrible things on the news. Like there's no reason why it works for some and not for others. So I do often have to remind myself, like I wear contacts, I wear glasses, I have terrible vision, I always have, but I never felt angry that my eyes don't work and someone else's do. My uterus doesn't work. Some people's uterus doesn't work, some do. There's no like rhyme or reason for it. It's just a real bummer. I I I do I do struggle more with the pregnancy than I do with other children. Once the baby is there, I really enjoy being around children. And so I like to be included in those. But yeah, it's very hard to see somebody decide they want to have a baby and so they have a baby and it's that simple.
Yeah, no, I've felt the same way. It's just I've had a lot of the why me, like why did I have to go through infertility? Why did I have to go through loss? Like, and it's hard to not feel like you did something wrong or that you're a bad person or
And
you know
I and
something.
then you obsess over, you know, the health things that you did. I'm like, gosh, those college years, I was not the healthiest, not the healthiest kid out there. Or was it like, because I work out too hard or not enough? Or is it because I, wore perfume for years and the fragrance has disrupted my hormones? And you're obsessing over all of it. And then I have to remember that this is a medical condition and people have done all the things I'm doing for many, many years and had no trouble getting pregnant. And it's not something I've done. It's it's just unfortunate, just like any other disease.
It's definitely hard as women because I think we feel the burden of that most of the time. I mean, even if it's not with our body, but especially when it's our body that's the problem and it becomes our burden.
Yeah. Yeah, I do feel guilt often in my relationship, which is something that my husband and I and me and my therapist work through that guilt of, he's going through this because of my body. And I feel sadness for him because he wants to be a dad and would make such a wonderful father. But I also feel very, very fortunate because I have a partner who's not only does shows me in actions, but also verbally, because I really need both. I get very needy. But he reminds me all the time how he wants me and married me and chose to be with me and not for my ability to reproduce. He's not like King Henry VIII and like we're in this, he picked me for me. Yeah.
Which I think is amazing that he's able to verbalize that and, make you still feel loved and important because yeah, you were the first family, whether you have the children or not.
Yeah,
You
and I do have to remind, sometimes I tell him, I'm like, today's feeling hard. I need a little more reassurance today. And he'll do that. Like it's also about me communicating to him when I'm feeling I'm needing a little more of that, when the day is just feeling harder.
have you had to deal with any of the insensitive comments that can come along with infertility and loss?
I gotta write a book of them. So, I think we all hear the toxic positivity ones. Those are really challenging. Like, you know, just relax and it'll happen for you is such a common one. I struggle a lot when people say like I just know this is going to work for you. And that's hard for me because you can't know. And sometimes what I need to do is be allowed to live with my fear that it might not. It doesn't work for everyone. Even just yesterday on the phone, I'm talking to my parents. It's Father's Day, so I called my dad and my mom. She said at some point she's like, I just I've talked to all these women and seen all these women now who they struggled, and then it finally happened years later. And I said to her, I didn't used to have so much courage, but I said, I'm like, that's because people only share the stories when it works out. And you're not hearing the stories when it doesn't work out because there's no baby photo to share. And so you hear success stories and you think, great, it'll be successful. But it's because those who it doesn't work for, you're not hearing, they're not sharing their stories. So I think that it's really important to let people live with their fear that it might not happen. I think it's really important to just listen and let people share what they're going through and what they're feeling. Don't offer them your children unless you're serious about it, which so far no one has been. But I've had people, they say, "Well, you can have one of mine," and I'm just like, "Okay, what time should I pick them up?" Right.
Do I get to pick which one or no?
Right? Oh, could I not have the baby one? I would like the responsible eldest. You have to
Yes.
pick.
Oh my gosh, I know people, I feel like people aren't, well, most people aren't trying to be hurtful, but those comments,
Yeah, intent versus impact is a real thing, and people intend to be kind. And I think that I try to remember that, and it always depends on the situation. Sometimes I say nothing, but then when it's someone like my mom and I'm gonna have to keep having this conversation, sometimes I will let her know, like, hey, this is why that doesn't land well. But when it's the person at the grocery store, like yesterday, that just says Happy Father's Day to my husband while we're going through, and like there's no children on us, so I don't know why you just kind of assume that, but we just say thank you and move on. So, yeah, I think that it often depends on the situation, but I do try on my social media account at least to speak toward what can be hurtful, what can you say instead, because maybe if you see it there, people will think about how they approach their friends going through it a little better.
yeah, I definitely know that going through it has made me, because I've said some of those things before and not even thought about it. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, like I felt horrible because you just don't know. Like
You're in it.
you think it's what's comforting. And then now I'm like, I'm so sorry. Like it's just completely changed how I relate to people and what I say to people.
And you do such a wonderful job as well, just trying to get that awareness spread. I loved the skirt campaign, for example, like really trying to bring so many people into this conversation and this understanding. And even if one person sees that and thinks, "Oh, I could call my friend going through this and just listen and approach it differently," that could mean the world for that
Yeah.
person. Um,
It
so for
really can. I think people think they have to do something, giant, like just big show of support. And really, all we need is you to say, you know what you're going through, it really sucks, and I'm sorry, and I'm here for you.
Yes, exactly. Often for me, it's just, that friend who who has a baby saying, "Hey, I'd love for you to come over and meet them sometime, but I also understand if you're not ready. Let me know what you need for comfort." Just sharing that piece of it, or just like you said, saying this really sucks. I'm sorry. Would you like to tell me more? Or can you tell me more about how I can support you through that? Can make such a difference.
Yeah, because I think like what you were saying earlier, that a lot of the comments are dismissive of our grief and of our feelings and of our experience. And by saying things like that, we know that they're acknowledging what we are going through and actively like thinking about it.
Or people are just uncomfortable with grief. Like people are uncomfortable with hard conversations. I do feel like sometimes I drop hints to let people know, like, hey, this isn't the vibe. Like one of our neighbors at a block party that we didn't know as well kind of said, like, oh, so, when is it going to be in Bob's turn? You've been here for a few years, no kids yet. And I said, I'm like, well, we've actually been trying for quite a while, but it hasn't been coming very easy for us. And I just kind of left it at that as that like little trinket of like, I'm not giving you my long and dirty dramatic story, but like, hey, it is a thing we're working on, and let's leave it at that. Someone else did follow up by saying, well, trying's the fun part. And I just wanted to be like, oh, he doesn't even need to be in the room when I'm getting pregnant. Like it's not much fun. But yeah, I think it can also help to just kind of drop those nuggets of information that you feel comfortable and safe sharing, but lets people know in the room and the space, like, hey, this is where we are at. And then people can hopefully read that message and understand it better.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree with that definitely. And I was just thinking about all the things I would want to say back to that, trying is so fun. Like, well, if you would like to learn how to give yourself shots or, you know, all of these things, sure, it's fun.
We're about to fall apart here.
So besides like creating your Instagram account and, talking with other loss and infertility parents, are there any other things that helped you with your grief?
Yeah. I therapy. Honestly, like I know it seems like an easy answer, but therapy is not easy. And I'm on a second therapist now. My first one was wonderful at the time, but I realized I just really needed a therapist more that had also gone through fertility challenges because then they understood the feelings without me having to teach them. This is a therapist who specializes in infertility and miscarriages. But even when I'm not having a hard day, when I know I'm seeing my therapist soon, it just lets me feel like, okay, I know I've got a check-in coming. Whatever feels bad, I can bring it up with them. I can talk to them about it. So therapy has been wonderful. My dog has been wonderful. I rely on those snuggles a lot and that goofiness a lot. Something that's really hard when you're going through treatments and infertility is you can't really live your life more than like 2 months out. Like my parents brought up me going home to visit them, and I was like, look, I don't know in 2 months if I'm transferring, if I'm pregnant, if I'm newly pregnant, if I'm miscarrying. Like, I just don't know. And that's been my life for the last 4 or 5 years. So when I do have awareness, I try to take advantage. So I do more last minute trips. If I know, like I know right now that based on, testing my hormones, I'm not going to be getting my period for at least a couple of weeks still. I was on Lupron for a while. So I thought, what can I do in the next 2 weeks that I won't be able to do once I start transfer cycle? So I'll go to wine country and do a tasting with friends, just trying to you have so little control. So trying to find where I can grasp control. That's been really helpful, but grief is hard because it's not a straight line. Some days are harder than others, and some days I wake up. I just a couple weeks ago actually, I woke up, I started brushing my teeth, I started trying to get ready, and then I just got back in bed. And I said to my husband when he kind of looked at me getting back in bed, I said, I'm feeling so blue. I don't know why. There's nothing that happened today. It's feeling really heavy today and it's feeling really blue today. And I know it might be the hormonal medications, but it just doesn't feel good. And he kind of said, he's like, well, whether or not it's the medicine that's making you feel bad, and that matters. So I stayed in bed, canceled my first work meeting, and just stayed in bed a little longer and let myself just feel that. And that's okay too. It doesn't, I don't think it always has to be a solution. Sometimes it can just be this is what the feeling is.
Yeah, and just sitting with the feeling and acknowledging it because I think a lot of us, myself included, just try to push them aside and, we got to work, we got to run errands, we got to go grocery shopping, we got to do whatever. We don't have time to feel. And so we
Yeah.
just push it aside.
And I have done better, though I'm still not great at it. I used to love to work out and I stopped once going through treatment because I was just so like nervous about getting my heart rate too up, my blood temperature, my temperature, all of that. But I've started trying to go for just at least a walk a day or doing like a 10-minute Apple Fitness thing a day. I always feel better. I know it's better for my body. I know it's better for my fertility health, but I don't always want to. My therapist gave me the advice. She was like, well, do you always want to brush your teeth? And I was like, I don't even think about it. It's just a thing you do. Like, I don't want to, I don't not want to. It's just what you do in the morning and before bed. She's like, well, you've got to start thinking about your physical health that way too. And whether or not you want to, just walk around the block. Just make it a habit. It doesn't have to be a workout. You don't even have to change your clothes. You don't even have to put a bra on, but can you walk around the block? And so that's been really helpful for me too, because I realized when my grief is feeling really, really big, I can find myself staying inside for days and days on end. And it's only when it's been like 4 days and I check the mailbox that I realize, my gosh, I haven't even walked as far as the mailbox in days. So I am trying to remind myself that it's not about motivation. My therapist actually said, which I loved, she's like, motivation is bullshit. Like, you don't have to be motivated to do something you don't want to do, but sometimes you still do it. And so I'm trying to approach that as well. So after our call, I might just go for a walk.
I know, I'm like, I'm getting motivated over here. I've been struggling with the same thing. I'll go through periods of like taking walks and then periods of not doing it. And I always feel better when I do it. And I'm like, why will you not just go do it?
Yeah,
Because I make it a big thing. I don't know. It's like I make it bigger than what it is, than just going outside.
yeah. And if I even sometimes I do the whole walk and I'm like, I just want to be home. I just want to be back on my couch. But then at least I get home back on my couch. I'm like, it's done. And I moved and my body moved a little and I got a little vitamin D. So
Yeah, you're like, well, that didn't hurt me, but I didn't like it.
yeah. Exactly.
Have you found other people in the loss community that are also like long hauler, still trying?
Yeah, I have some wonderful, beautiful souls that I have met on Instagram that chat with me. I won't say her name because her profile isn't public, but if she's listening to this, she'll know I'm talking about her. There's one in Ireland who's had repeated implantation failures, and another in Denver who has had miscarriage and repeated transfer failures. And we just hold each other in a different way. Something that is become very meaningful to me is when somebody trusts me enough to send me a message. Sometimes I'll get a DM that says, "Hey Meg, I don't even know why I'm sending you this, but I just felt like I need to tell someone I'm miscarrying again, or my transfer failed, or my retrieval didn't get any eggs." They just, they put out there the horrible news they got or the thing that's happening just to have a safe space to say it. And to trust me with that is, I do not take that for granted. So I'm grateful I have them that I can share it with, but I'm also grateful for people who don't have an infertility account that just have a private account but feel safe talking to me. That's been tremendous as well. So I hope people continue to feel safe doing that. I want to be a safe space. Even if I tell people all the time, I'm like, even if it's 2 a.m. and I'm not going to respond and you just need to put the words out there. I had a woman send me a voice memo once that lasted a few minutes, but voice memos do that while she was miscarrying in the bathroom. And she just said, she's like, I'm alone here right now and I just want to talk to someone and I know you're probably asleep, but this is happening. And I woke up and I saw her message and I reached out and we talked a little after. I was able to talk to her a little bit about, the physical things she could anticipate in the next few days and how to just take care of her, the cleanliness and things with that and what to expect with her body. But gosh, being a space someone feels safe reaching out to in the hardest moments of their life is truly a tremendous thing. I'm sure you have also experienced that with the account you've created, that it's a beautiful thing and a wonderful thing that I do not take lightly.
I feel the same way. Like I feel like so honored that people would trust me with like their feelings and their, because to me, I'm just a person. Like I'm just me, but to
You're
have
you're a
people.
person who understands too, and that is significant.
Yeah, especially when, I've learned I had supportive family and friends for the most part, but I've learned even if you have support, it's very lonely. And there
Mhm.
are so many people out there that have zero support. And I think that that's horrible. So, yeah, definitely want to be there for those people.
Yeah. And even the support you have in life, it's just never the same as the support you can get from someone who really has been there. I also think there's a bit of a sense of security in talking to someone who like maybe you get to know, but is also a little bit of a stranger.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
you can tell me your ugliest, darkest thoughts and feelings that you feel super crappy about having, and it's not like I'm gonna run into you at the grocery store. And it's
Right.
not like I'm gonna judge you because I've probably felt and thought them all too. But it's a space that it's kind of special that way to be able to do that.
That is true. It's made me feel less weird for some of
Yeah,
the thoughts and like things that I've gone through, because like we kind of already talked about the jealousy or those things can be hard to deal with. And then you're made to feel like the bad person because you don't want to go to the baby shower or because you don't want to do this. And it's nice to like talk to other people and know that, oh, they feel that too.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So if people wanted to connect with you, where would they go for that?
Well, the easiest is Instagram. So my handle is at @for_the_Baroness. I also have a blog for thebaroness.com that you can send me an email through. I love when people share their stories there. We've shared a lot of stories there. But really, Instagram's the easiest place because I'm checking it all the time. I'm having most of my conversations there. I never really branched out into other social media because I've always thought of it as like this is just a community I want to have, not necessarily like I want to be doing a thing. Like I still have a full-time job on top of the full-time infertility treatments. So Instagram's the best place, and it could be as simple as just like sending me a message that says like, "Hey, I saw you on this podcast and I've been through it too," or "My sister's going through it. How do I make sure to care for them better?" Or "That thing you said was ridiculous." And maybe that's the case, but I'll definitely be there to hear those messages.
Is there anything else that you'd like to share or add?
I, you know, I appreciate so much that you have this podcast, that you have this voice and you share these words. I went through my first three losses and my first year of this journey before creating the accounts alone and feeling alone. And I've even since then, I've had some really dark days and weeks. And I think the only thing that truly helps get out of the light is knowing that there are others who care about what you're going through, whether or not you end up having success in the end. I think those stories matter. So I appreciate you so much sharing those stories. And I feel anyone who's listening to this podcast, I imagine there's a reason you're listening. So I'm really sorry that you are going through it and felt the need to find a podcast like this, but know that like this is a space that's safe. And I hope that people feel that connection.
Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Meg, for sharing your story with us. I really think it's important to highlight what she said about holding out hope, but also letting yourself feel the fear and the sadness that comes along with infertility and loss. Toxic positivity is real and can take a toll on our mental health. I think it's important to acknowledge the feelings that are uncomfortable or not, quote, pretty. We do often hear all of the positive outcomes where people do finally end up with a baby. Yet there are many who are still trying or who never do get to bring home their living baby. And their stories are just as important to share. There is no right journey in life. We all just have to learn to navigate the particular circumstances that we are dealt. And just know that it's okay to share your story, no matter where you are in the process. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. If you like the show, please take a moment to leave a positive review or rating on Apple or Spotify. Thank you so much for tuning in, and remember, we are all in this together.